I do think it's kind of weird that the MAGAs have created a coalition that extends from let people die because heaven awaits evangelicals to like atheist gay vampires trying to defeat the linear passage of time. It's pretty broad. It's a pretty broad group. Hello and welcome to the Bulwark podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. It is June 2nd already. Somehow it's summer of 2025, and June is when you get fascist hell, and it's Monday, and so that is why I am here, as usual, with Bill Kristol. How you doing, Bill?
Fine, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing pretty darn well. We had just a wonderful week of events. It was great to see everybody last week in Nashville and Chicago. I was a little weary, but I got a day of rest yesterday, and so life is good. We have some good news to start with for once. Russia experienced what's being called Russia's Pearl Harbor yesterday. A little brief on what happened if people missed it. Ukraine launched an unprecedented drone strike deep inside Russia, targeting dozens of strategic bombers at several different bases. They launched 117 attack drones from trucks that had been covertly placed near Russian air bases as far as Siberia. Around 40 Russian military planes were reportedly hit. Zelensky said 34% of Russian strategic bombers were hit, and they're supposed to have another in the so-called peace talks in Istanbul today. And Zelensky had announced that, like Putin, he's sending his flunkies this time as well. So a change in momentum, if you will, on what is happening there. I don't know what your reaction was and what you're hearing from folks.
I mean, I was excited and pleased and awfully impressed by the military capabilities of the Ukrainians, but also not just military, but kind of intelligence and covert. A lot of this was, I guess this was a 1.5 year long planned operation, getting the truck into place and all that coordination of it. It's really something impressive and heartening. And, generally, I was saying this to someone just over the weekend here in New York. I mean, I'm very worried about Ukraine. I wish we had an administration that supported it. Obviously, it's terrible and a disgrace that Trump isn't doing so. On the other hand, if you had told me on January 20th when it looked as if, Trump was just going to go all in for Putin and the Europeans might not step up and there might be an actual kind of almost catastrophe on the front in Ukraine, if you told me that we would be where we are now here on, June 2nd, I would be a little surprised. I mean, pleasantly surprised, right? I think they're turns out they've been underestimated all along, the Ukrainians. They continue to be underestimated. We are doing at least the intelligence cooperation, and still there's some arms flowing. The Europeans have stepped up more, but mostly the Ukrainians. I mean, all honor to the Ukrainians who are fighting this underdog fight with such courage and resiliency. But also in intelligence and ability.
Yeah, it was a funny David Frum tweet yesterday. I was like, pretty soon Europe's going to have to worry about whether they're going to get Ukrainian security guarantees. I guess they did this operation also without telling us, which is also interesting and noteworthy, given the fact that obviously a lot of what was needed in the first few years was like our support was required, particularly on the intelligence side. So I think that is also just a positive sign about their capabilities. Maria Avdiva, who I follow, who does kind of security and war updates, gave a pretty astonishing, just sort of blow by blow of what they did. They kind of moved these mobile cabins into Russia, and the drones were hidden under the roofs of the cabins. Kind of a Trojan horse type situation. And then when the signal hit, all of the roofs opened remotely all over Russia. And they took out these bombers that Russia can't build anymore. They're kind of old Cold War era bomber planes. And so obviously it has the implications as well, because we've seen the degree to which they've been pummeling Ukraine in the last week or two. I did a YouTube interview with my guy Kalen from Kyiv last week. People can go check out just about the degree of their Russia's attack on Ukraine. So it has that positive development as part of it as well.
And if you want to put it in a broader context, I don't want to get into too much wishful thinking. I mean, God knows the Ukrainians are paying a horrible price, and all of us will if Putin continues to sort of be able to fight this war unmolested, except for direct Ukrainian counterattacks. We could certainly be doing so much more. But I mean, maybe it suggests that the forces of liberal democracy, the forces fighting against tyranny and against brutality and against invading one's neighbors, can be reasonably strong, even if the U.S. sits it out, basically. I mean, I do think if the U.S. goes full in on the other side, that's just a terrible problem. But maybe there's enough ambiguity in Trump's own mind, enough resistance from some in his administration, maybe from Congress. Not to put too great hopes there either, but a little bit of a sense that he can't go all the way to Putin, and the Lindsey Graham has 80 co-sponsors for this resolution toughening sanctions on Russia. I mean, maybe the forces of liberal democracy and decency can at least hold their own, despite the fact that the U.S. is sort of absent from the playing field for the next 4 years. And that would be the hopeful big picture version of what Ukraine is accomplishing, right?
I appreciate that you went there because I had some darker thoughts associated with it. But I agree there's something to what you said. I wonder, I'm going to get into kind of the U.S. part of it in a second, but it is pretty alarming to me about the implications for the future of war. Like, I went from immediately being quite excited as I was, deep diving on the various social media threads of military accounts that I follow, about how cool this attack was. On the other hand, like, all credit to Ukraine, of course, for plotting this and the the ingenuity, but it does take us into a whole new world. Where like these kind of retrofitted Chinese drones can just pop over a target, and I don't know that we have. Let's just say the seriousness of leadership that might be required to combat that future. I don't know if you had any of those, those feelings as well.
I do. And I had my version of that was reading up just a little on AI stuff this weekend, which is scary and provides some great opportunities as well, obviously, in medical research and other things, but has many scary activities, both in terms of war, but also in terms of surveillance and other anti-liberal measures here at home. And, with a serious administration that was, I don't know, center-right or center-left, honestly, I don't know if it would make much difference in this case, that sort of tried to grapple with this new technology in terms of regulations and what to encourage and what to discourage and where to try to create some barriers to China getting stuff, and in other places where it's foolish, you can't do it. We benefit from the trade. Anyway, whatever, a serious administration thinking seriously about this, we could be fine. We're pretty good at adapting to new technology and hopefully sort of taking some of the upsides and minimizing the downsides, but there'll always be some downsides. But I mean, you're right, 3.5, and I get back to always 3.5 more years, more than 3.5. What is it, 3 2/3 still more years of Trump and his people in there, Tulsi Gabbard running intelligence and Trump and Hegseth. And I mean, it's going to be, it's risky. It's really risky. I mean, that's, I guess, I just don't feel like even people on our side have fully appreciated where we could be at the end of 2028. If they just continue on the path they naturally kind of like to go on, which is both very dangerous and damaging to the country in many ways, but also just so foolish and short-sighted and stupid that one pays the price for that too, right?
Yeah, the tail risk is definitely something that I was talking about a lot last year to people, not effectively enough, I guess. And also just kind of the potential for national suicide for no reason. But to this point, about kind of the stupidity of the people that are supposed to be minding the store here. This is an NBC article over the weekend. Tulsi Gabbard is exploring ways to revamp Trump's routine intelligence briefing in order to build his trust in the material and make it more aligned with how he likes to consume information. That's very delicately put by NBC. They go on, one idea that's been discussed is possibly creating a video version of the presidential daily brief that's made to look and feel like a Fox News broadcast. There are 5 sources with direct knowledge of the discussions that provided this information to NBC, I think, which shows that there's some alarm on the inside about what kind of material is getting to Donald Trump. This was not in the NBC story, but a kind of a related news item, was that maybe last year, folks might remember, Mark Caputo wrote for us about Natalie Harp, the human printer, the printer that just prints out random shit for Trump. And I was reading an article about how she has been part of how Laura Loomer has been getting her info to Trump is that Natalie prints out her tweets and like puts them on Trump's desk, and like he can't read the presidential daily brief because that's too long and there are big words, but he can read 280 characters from Laura Loomer. So I don't know how much there's to say about this, but in contrast to the Ukrainian ingenuity, Donald Trump needing a security briefing via Fox and Friends is a little alarming.
It's terrible. And I mean, I gather since my day, the PDB, the presidential briefs, and all the other intelligence documents, of course, incorporate video. That's not the issue. We incorporate video in Bulwark, as we're here, right? I mean, that's not, obviously, that's fine. It's the kind of dressing it up as a fake Fox News broadcast, because that's the only way Trump will can assimilate it. It's not great.
We're going to have some characters from Fox News. We'll have some pundits.
Right.
We'll have Laura Ingram's like ambiguously gay sidekick, whatever that guy's name with the painted on hair. You got to get him in there. Maybe Greg Gutfeld, a little bit of a comedic relief. I think that's going to be important, that you have like people playing roles. Remember when Tom Nichols got to be a character on Succession? He was a pundit on Succession.
Is that right?
So
yeah.
have one of those situations. You have a bad guy character, somebody for Trump to be like, oh, whatever that person says, I'm a no on that. I
think I'm looking at that guy. I think you have a great future there.
I don't know. Maybe you, Bill.
Maybe I'm more his generation. Maybe me and his PDB.
We're going to negatively polarize Trump into making the right decision by putting a fake pundit onto Fox that he doesn't like to tell him to do the other thing.
Yeah, we have to be careful in what we say, right? I guess. Oh,
God. All right. Well, you can at least laugh at it. You on Sunday, the Kristol Sunday conversations, which I recommend. You had Jonathan Cohn, our colleague, on yesterday to talk about kind of a wide range of things in the health space and what's happening with HHS, what's happening on the Hill with the Medicaid cuts. What struck you most from that combo?
The beneath the goofiness of RFK and the people around RFK, I mean, there's real damage being done both right now in terms of what vaccines are being recommended, in terms of the near and medium term future, in terms of the cuts to Medicaid, which spill over into Medicare, into healthcare more broadly. And then really in terms of the medium and long term future, in terms of vaccine development, for example, it's like, it's not just if you don't approve this vaccine or don't approve that one for certain people, or you send weird mixed signals on vaccines. Vaccine makers will then make some decisions, vaccine producers rather, will make some decisions about what vaccines to produce. Will there be a steady market for them? Can they sell? Is the U.S. the right place to be the base for doing them? Maybe they should do more abroad. And then, of course, you put it together with all the craziness about the universities and the immigration stuff. And you really have I was talking with someone about this last night who knows that world pretty well here in New York, actually. I mean, you have real damage being done to our future, to our medical future, to our future in innovation and technology, to our competitive future. It's really, is there a single complex of policies, the universities, immigration, RFK Jr. in charge of health, the Medicaid cuts, the healthcare cuts in general, that does more? Is there a stronger case of self-inflicted damage to the future of this country? And it's all unambiguous, incidentally. Like, there's no downside to having the most professional and treatment of vaccines possible and the best scientific and medical knowledge. There's no downside to having more and more people come and study here and participate in scientific and medical progress, and also just providing medical care for people. There's no downside to what we've been doing, honestly, with the universities in terms of biomedical research and leading the world for 40, 50 years. It's not as if sometimes policy areas, as you well know, have trade-offs, and there's kind of like, it's a little bit of a tough call, and maybe government's expanded too much here and stuff. This is like one of the least ambiguous policy areas, broadly speaking, I think, that one could think of. And we're doing what we can to damage ourselves, I think.
Even steel manning their side, they don't even really present a downside. The only thing I can think of, and unfortunately, I follow an increasing number of MAHA accounts, so I feel like I know what their arguments are. Like there's the attack on the gain of function research, right? What's happening in China, like this idea that there's some risky type of research that led to, conceivably the lab leak of COVID. And so, but that's like a very narrow thing, right? That's like, could we look into, is there a very specific type of research that like maybe the risks outweigh the benefits, right? Like on the university research here in America, like they haven't even presented anything like that. Like what, like the argument is essentially, we don't like how the universities handled campus protesters.
Right.
And so we're going to punish their research arm, right? Like it's not as if there's like, and I guess there's some argument maybe about waste, like some of this stuff is being wasted. But I mean, that is just like the number is so tiny compared to the budget. It's hard to take that seriously when they're, gonna just explode the deficit with their bill. So it's like they don't even, right? Am I wrong? What Cohn and others say about that?
No, I think he would agree. I mean, the conventional, when I was in actually the George H.W. Bush White House, Vice President Quayle was in charge of something called the Competitiveness Council. And one of the things we tried to do was speed up the approval of drugs to sort of make the whole NIH, CDC, FDA process, which is a complicated process, but important. Obviously, you want safe drugs and drugs that are effective, as promised, and so forth. But to speed that up and to streamline it a bit, I guess that was a more traditional conservative critique of big liberal bureaucracies, or just big bureaucracy, let's just say. And it was a reasonable one at the time. But I think we did a fair amount.
Technocratic critique, right? Like Obama administration had an effort to do
right.
That same
and
thing, right?
People like us pointed out, and I think people pointed this out both on the left and the right. And this is very much of a case where you could have a centrist agenda going forward that would be quite, healthy. That, why is it that we suspend a lot of these regulations when we really have an emergency and want to produce drugs, whether for the pandemic or for AIDS? I mean, that would suggest that now you don't want to suspend. Maybe you're not going to act like everything's a super emergency. And so you're going to have some more standard procedures, but maybe you do want to look at your standard procedures and make them a little friendlier to the new drugs, even if they're unusual or haven't, been gone through 22 years of, controlled trials and so forth. So that's all a reasonable debate to have. And if we had a healthy politics, we would have it. I guess I don't know how much Biden may have done a lot of this behind the scenes. He had responsible people running, I think, these agencies. I do think it just is a political point, but I've just been sort of stewing over it recently. The Biden administration's failure to explain, even when it was doing probably some good things, to explain those good things, caused huge damage. It made it seem like the alternative was status quo, big government bureaucracy, no one in charge, no one reforming anything, or Trump. Now, for all I know, Ashish Jha, whom I know actually somewhat, who's been on some conversations with me, and I think maybe on some stuff with you, and he was a dean at Brown, and then he went into the Biden administration to run the efforts against the pandemic. He's I've talked to him. I mean, he is in favor of reforming certain things, and so are most intelligent people in this area. And for all I know, he did, incidentally. But the fact that maybe I should have followed this more closely, but the fact that I have to say, for all I know, is, I think, an indictment of the Biden administration and its communications people, but also the broader effort on the pro-Biden Democratic side over the last 4 years. That it just never, the reform agenda just got lost in the kind of returning to normalcy agenda, which was a reasonable agenda, especially for the first little while. But anyway,
I think that's fair. What is there? Just one more thing on this: was there anything specific? I know that Cohn talked about or wrote for us about the cancellation of this bird flu vaccine and how that is like a very great risk. I don't know. Was there anything else specific, or was there anything?
So I think both the cancellation of that research and then also the kind of totally wobbly and inconsistent guidance last week on COVID, on the COVID shot for pregnant women, yes or no, and that's dangerous, obviously, in some way. But the cancellation, just on that one, I think people should, if they want to watch that discussion I had with Jonathan, would be is interesting. Was what was being funded was, in effect, Moderna, which was the key in developing mRNA, the pandemic, the COVID vaccine, is trying to set up a platform to use mRNA. I don't even understand this well enough to say the words right, research or production, for many other vaccines. And that's very promising, just as, in fact, they got a COVID vaccine much faster than they thought, they might be able to get a lot of other vaccines that work much faster than one would have thought, thanks to mRNA. And that's what Moderna wanted research on. So he canceled the program that was, Kennedy could have still said, hey, look, we're going to do this program so we can really see what we could do. Now, we're not going to approve these drugs without extremely careful, these vaccines without extremely careful tests. And I don't think the tests have been careful enough in the past. And we're going to have twice as many tests and be super alert to all side effects, all the kind of Kennedy stuff, most of which is nonsense. But still, he could have done some of that, you know what I mean, and still gone ahead with this funding, this platform that, as I understand it, would provide for very fruitful research. At one point, Jonathan made is, if we don't fund it, others will. And one of the others that will is China. And do we want to be in a position in 5 or 10 years when there's a bird flu outbreak and there's very, very promising mRNA vaccines and China has them and we don't? And we have to ask China, hey, could we have some of those vaccines? We got vaccines.
We're the ones with the shitty ones.
Yeah, exactly. Like right. Time, we were so, we're so used to being kind of number one in a way that, and getting treated well, as it were, by our allies and to some degree even by the world, that we took it for granted that we would get the vaccines when they were developed in January of 2021. A lot of them were not developed in the U.S. I mean, not produced in the U.S. A lot of them were produced in Europe for various random reasons. That's where the drug companies had facilities and so forth. But everyone understood, look, we were going to get a very good chunk of them at first, and other countries did too. And it seemed like it was distributed pretty fairly. But do we want to be in a position 5 or 10 years from now when our European allies, of course, aren't feeling terribly well disposed to us because we seem to be picking fights with them all the time, and they're thinking, you know what, we love the good people of the U.S., but we'll just make sure that every single person here in the EU gets the vaccines first, and especially, do you want to be dependent on China? So I think that the way in which we're just hurting ourselves for the future, totally pointlessly, is what's striking.
Jonathan Cohn's newsletter is so good, by the way. It's if you go to thebulwark.com and check out the breakdown. It's been really important ad for us as he kind of digs deep into the policy stuff. He's particularly strong in the health area, but we've got a bunch of other policy things. You sick of drinking your calories or waking up hungover, or looking for something to have that would spice up a little afternoon hangout with friends, but that isn't going to leave you feeling yucky the next day, I would turn to Sol with their out-of-office gummies and out-of-office beverages. Hey, for example, was hanging out with some other parents yesterday. It's a little Sunday afternoon. I don't know, Sunday afternoon, not really in the market for drinking. We got a big week ahead of us. So turn to the Sol out-of-office beverages. They're light. They've got, they're bubbly. It's like having a little bubbly water, a little fizzy. It's adding to the enjoyment of a beautiful Sunday afternoon here in New Orleans. Sol is a wellness brand. Sol's a wellness brand that believes feeling good should be fun and easy. They specialize in hemp-derived THC and CBD products designed to boost your mood and help you unwind. Their best-selling out-of-office gummies were designed to provide a mild, relaxing buzz, boost your mood, and enhance creativity and relaxation. They come in 4 different strengths, so you can find the perfect dose for your vibe. Gentle microdose is just fine, by the way. But, for the real ones out there, there's also a perfect buzz, noticeable high, or a fully lit experience. With wellness at the forefront, you can feel good about what you're putting in your body. All of Sol's products are made from organically farmed USA-grown hemp. Bring on the good vibes and treat yourself to Sol today. Right now, Sol is offering my audience 30% off your entire order. Go to getsol.com and use the code THEBulwark. That's getsol.com, promo code THEBulwark for 30% off. Hey, YouTube fam, if you want to support The Bulwark, the best way to do it is by becoming a YouTube Bulwark Plus member. The Bulwark is truly independent. We have no corporate overlords. We're not settling any dumb lawsuits with Trump. By joining, you help support our work, and you can get a bunch of perks right here on this platform. Ad-free content, bonus videos, live streams, and some emojis of me, which I guess some people want. So come join, come hang out, become a Bulwark YouTube Plus member, and I'll be seeing you in the comments. So behave. Somebody who's not that strong on healthcare policy is Senator Joni Ernst, Republican from Iowa. You like that transition? She taped a psychotic selfie video in a cemetery, that mocked the people who were upset with her previous comment during a town hall that everyone's going to die, so we shouldn't worry that much about the Medicaid cuts. I want to play part of the audio of that selfie video for our listeners' audio pleasure.
I made an incorrect assumption that everyone in the auditorium understood that, yes, we are all going to perish from this earth. So I apologize. And I'm really, really glad that I did not have to bring up the subject of the tooth fairy as well. But for those that would like to see eternal and everlasting life, I encourage you to embrace my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
I mean,
Bill?
Yeah, if you're in a hole, stop digging and all that. I guess not in her case. Huh? I mean, when I first saw
cemetery, you can keep digging. You want to go 6 feet under?
When I first saw, maybe it was your tweet, honestly, that said, "Oh my God, she's now doing an audio from a cemetery," to kind of, where she's kind of not really apologizing, but almost making fun of people who thought her earlier comments were a little insensitive, and she's like doubling down. I thought, well, it's kind of tasteless actually to make make jokes about a cemetery. I mean, I assumed she was just done a video from her office, and someone was saying it's like from a cemetery, but in fact it's literally I guess it is, right? I mean, a cemetery.
Yeah, no, she's walking through a cemetery taping this video,
and that's unbelievable. The tooth fairy, how does the tooth fairy come into this? It's
confusing. I think what she's trying to say is that people, like grown-ups, understand that eventually they die, and they understand that the tooth fairy is not real, but the metaphor doesn't really work, because she was trying to say to people, that they need to come to terms with something that does happen, and I guess she's trying to say that that's similar to being aware about something that doesn't exist. It's pretty strange, but it's quite strange.
Tooth fairy is not really is a nice little thing about teeth, not about death. I mean, it's a little weird. I was just discussing the tooth fairy the other day with one of our granddaughters. Actually, yeah, I'm glad the tooth fairy is going strong here. I kind of would have thought this is an issue, right? The 21st. I know you would know about it, I suppose. Like you think quarter way through the 21st century. I'm not saying this critically. I'm just sort of struck that maybe it's one of those things that would have been big in 1940 or 1970 and have evaporated by now, but it seems to be doing fine.
I find the tooth fairy deeply creepy. As a quick aside, like, what is this person doing? She's stealing children's teeth. She's bringing them to an imaginary land. She's building a home with the children's dirty teeth. I find it creepy, and I was going to be a no, and take the joy and steal the joy from my child, but my husband wisely suggested that was probably not right, and we should just go along with the ruse for a while.
And she likes it, right? The tooth fairy.
She does.
They all love the tooth fairy. I think they don't overthink it the way we do, But then the final thing, I mean, I don't want to get too earnest, but I don't know, using this as an opportunity, I don't know, I guess who paid for this video, whether this was the taxpayers or her campaign, I don't know, to proselytize, if that's the right word, in favor of her particular Lord and Savior, is also a little bit like once upon a time, actual sitting government officials thought they should keep their religious. They went to church fine, and they, like Biden, certainly is a good Catholic and went to Mass a lot and would occasionally talk about what it meant to him, obviously, his religion. I don't think he went around telling everyone else, hey, you know what, if you want to really improve your life, you should become a member of the Roman Catholic Church. So I find that a little...
It's worse than that, actually, Bill. I appreciate that you're being gentle in that critique, but it would be inappropriate if you were doing a video that was something like, I don't know, let's say it was about, a culture of life in society and how you want to protect the unborn. And then when they're born, you want to make sure that they have like the support that they need and the mothers do, right? Or let's say you're doing a video about, if you're a Democratic Christian, you're doing a video about how USAID should be funded. And as Christians, we should care about people throughout the world. And I'm a Christian. And it's again, at the very end being like, you should join my faith would still be not in our tradition and a little inappropriate. But in this case, like, she's using the Christianity as a shield for an effort to cut healthcare funding for poor people. Like, that's not Christian. There's nothing that's like, oh, Jesus really wanted you to understand that we should let the poor die because they would be welcomed into the bosom of heaven afterwards. And so there's no sense for us to worry about our fellow, the sick and, the indigent. We shouldn't worry about them because you get eternal life with me. That was not the fucking message.
No.
I went to Catholic school. I heard, we didn't read as much of the Bible as the evangelicals did. They're more Bible based than us, but I got the gist. And it wasn't like let the poor sick people die because it doesn't matter because heaven exists. That's not actually the point of the faith.
And it wasn't, let's make jokes about efforts to help poor people from being sick and possibly dying. But, it wasn't like that. Those jokes are fine because we all believe in heaven anyway. So what does it matter? And that's kind of, that's what she's saying.
Yeah.
What she's really saying, I believe, however, is, of course, people like me and many of my donors and wealthy backers don't have to worry about this because it's Medicaid and we don't need Medicaid.
Right.
I mean, don't we think that subtext of this is a kind of creepy, we don't care that much about the people on Medicaid.
Yeah, well, and I think the subtext is you shouldn't listen to my critics because they're godless.
Yeah,
is also
good point.
Like, don't listen to them. They're godless. Don't listen to them. We're gonna cut you. We're gonna cut your Medicaid. I guess my last comment on it is it's just the tone is also so condescending. Like, had Kamala Harris ever taped a video that had that level of sneering condescension towards a voter is concerned, honestly, Fox News would never stop talking about it.
Okay.
I mean, it would still be talked about into the 2080s. There would be an AI Fox host talking about, remember that time? I mean, just think about the Obama clinging to the guns and religion comment, which was like a poorly put. Like he was intended to like he was intending to be to provide an explanation for people, and he's doing so in a condescending manner. She is sneering at the people that showed up to her town hall and mocking them.
Right.
I honestly, it would just be wall to wall forever. And Democrats, and by the way, if it was a Democratic senator that or Kamala or whoever that had done something like this, all of the Democratic media would be, attacking her and saying, "Oh, we're so condescending. We need to have some self-reflection." I can't imagine that's what's happening on Fox today. This is just not really related, but it came across my feed today. Your friend Peter Thiel, he had an interview where he was talking about. This is an old interview, but it was re-upped. He's talking about how he's trying to extend his lifespan, and he's taking nicotine as a nootropic drug because it raises IQ. He's got HGH pills to promote muscle mass. He's taking semaglutide. He's changed to a weekly injection of Monjaro. He's taking another drug that he thinks will have a significant effect in suppressing the cancer risk. I do think it's kind of weird that the MAGAs have created a coalition that extends from let people die because heaven awaits evangelicals to like atheist gay vampires trying to defeat the linear passage of time. It's a pretty broad group. I don't know.
It is, and Peter, I think sometimes used to think sometimes that he was a Catholic or had certainly is friendly to certain parts of Catholic thought, and so that also was a little, I've never understood. That's been a surprise to me, the extent to which they've knit together a coalition that, as you say, is full of, intellectually incoherent, to say the least. Again, Nietzschean strongman, will to power and Christian, sanctity. Those, whatever you think about either, each serious people in each tradition knew that they were opposed to the other, right? Serious Christians were not really on board with Nietzscheanism, and Nietzsche was not on board with earnest Christian humility and so forth. And so, I don't know, it's a good lesson actually about political coalitions. I think especially true, and Umberto Eco makes this point in this fantastic essay on Ur-Fascism, which I recommend. You can Google it.
That's so good.
And people can Google it. And the fascism or quasi-fascism is a funny combination of a lot of different emotions and psychological aspects. And they don't cohere. That they cohere in is in their hatred of, I would say, freedom and liberal democracy and some aspects of just modernity and all of that, the bourgeois society. That's the coherence. But the rest of it is a mishmash, but it doesn't make it less powerful. And that's a very important, there's a lot of our friends, and I fall into this trap sometimes too. I've pointed out an intellectual contradiction in Trump world, Well, that's not, look, it's not nothing. It's important to point out. And sometimes it shows the way to a political cleavage that can be exploited, which we should do more of. That's another discussion. But the intellectual contradiction point doesn't mean that they can't cheerfully go ahead and, the Nietzscheans can try to send the dark-skinned immigrants away because they believe in race science. And every elements, they can come together in very bad and hateful policies, I guess.
Yeah, well, and then the evangelicals can go along with it because of the belief in now Christian nationalism. I think part of the reason why it does cohere is that most of the Christians have refashioned their Christian belief to eliminate some of the humility and some of the other elements that you mentioned. I don't think I got to tell you about this game-changing product I use before a night out with drinks called ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol, because in Chicago and Nashville at our events last week, several of our listeners came up and asked me if I was taking my pre-alcohol. And so the brand awareness has reached the Bulwark podcast listeners. But if you're not aware, it's the ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic Drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's a buildup of this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for rough next days after drinking. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. All right, we're going to be using ZBiotics. We've got our big event, our World Pride event, the fundraiser, coming up this Friday. Hope to see you all there in Washington, D.C., Friday, June 6th. And I'll be bringing the pre-alcohol. We're going to be going out afterwards. I heard John Lovett's even going to go out to the club with me afterwards, which should be an experience. And so we know we're going to have a big night. ZBiotics, that's going to be the first drink of the night here. For you guys, summer's here, which means more opportunities to celebrate the warm weather. So before that backyard barbecue, don't forget your ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol. Drink one before drinking and wake up feeling great and ready to take on the next day and all that summer has to offer. Go to zbiotics.com/thebulwark to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use the Bulwark at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/thebulwark and use code thebulwark at checkout for 15% off. Another one of those topics is on immigration. We do this every week, but I just want to, I don't want to lose it. I think it's important not to stop mentioning the horrors of what they're doing on immigration, because otherwise people just begin to accept it. Just two snapshots from the weekend. In San Antonio, 3 migrant children were taken into custody and restrained with zip ties. The children, 2 boys and a girl, were between the ages of 9 and 12. They were detained after an immigration judge had dismissed their case. So the immigration judge had dismissed their case. ICE didn't know what to do with them. They were zip tied. There's a reporter from San Antonio that's been covering it. They're eventually released. But again, what are we doing? In Boston, Marcelo Gomez, age 18, he's an honor student. He's going to a volleyball tournament ahead of his high school graduation, which was to have been yesterday. He spent his high school graduation in a cell with 30 other men. He was the youngest one there. He's not a criminal. He's never done anything. They did not accuse him of any crimes. He was brought to America from Brazil at the age of 5. And on the way to the volleyball tournament, ICE detained him. They chained his ankles and wrists and put him into the cell where, as far as I know, as when we're taping it here this morning, he's still there. This is just madness. This is madness. It's inhumane. It's not keeping anybody safe. It's shameful. Whatever you think about what we should do with folks who are brought to this country.
Yeah, horrible. And this is, I guess, so they can hit their quotas, and it's easier to hit your quota of deportations or detentions, planning for deportation, en route to deportations. If you go hang out outside courthouses where people are actually showing up for legal, been told to show up by ICE and are showing up per instructions from the authorities, then they have this gimmick. I don't know if they did this in the Texas case, but they dismissed the case. They asked actually that the judge dismiss the case. But then if you've only been there 2 years, you can be deported in an expedited way, you're in a way you don't have as many protections. And so the dismissal is actually a kind of fake way of letting them just seize you. The Massachusetts case is horrifying. An 18-year-old, honors high school student who's been there since he's 5. There's a case also of a woman from the Philippines, I believe, and I think a nurse maybe, who's been here for decades, like 40 years or 50 years or something, and who's obviously in her 60s or 50s or 60s, who was detained for 3 months by ICE. I mean, the degree of just idiotic cruelty, but also let's talk about use of resources. My impression is the entire DHS and FBI are now, and a large chunk of other law enforcement agencies are focused on, maybe including some FBI agents, since they seem to show up at some of these detentions, are focused on immigration, but especially on the mass deportation. That's their agenda. Maybe they should focus a little more on individuals who are possible domestic terrorists. I know the Trump administration doesn't let you use the word domestic terrorist. Some can be native-born Americans. That was the case of the shooter here in D.C. less than 2 weeks ago who killed two Jews at in front of the Jewish Museum in D.C. After a peaceful meeting there. And of course, the weekend yesterday in Boulder, it was someone who had come from Egypt, had been, I guess, overstayed a tourist visa, then had gotten to work, applied for asylum, so he got a work permit. That had expired. Maybe if they had more people looking at middle-aged single men whose work permit had expired and making sure those people aren't a threat, and maybe, if appropriate, even deporting them back to their countries if they're safe, or at least having an eye on them, that would be a better use of resources than, so apart from the moral grotesqueness of it all, the misuse of resources and of going after these students and nurses and people who've been here for decades, people who are manifestly no threat to anyone. And now we got 350,000 Venezuelans. I'm going to just say off the 98% of whom are no threat to anyone and are living in Florida, and their neighbors would probably report them if they were a threat. And they're going to waste, apart from the, again, inhumaneness of it, waste resources going after them instead of focusing on some people who should be focused on in terms of possible threats.
Yeah, there's the opportunity cost side of the resources, right? To your point, particularly, I think it's very relevant to bring up, especially with this guy from Egypt, which I'm going to get into more in a second, in Boulder. But there's also just the financial resources, right? Kristi Noem, again, this is like the kind of thing that would be a huge scandal in another administration that just gets lost. But the DHS is spending way more than has been allocated. Right. And again, so we have the supposed fiscal responsibility. We're doing DOGE, we're doing government efficiency. Well, DHS keeps spending money. Like it's part of the deportations and there are other things that they're doing that have not been authorized by Congress. And Kristi Noem was in front of Congress, I think it was last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, and was asked about this, and was basically just like, whatever, like we're just going to do what we want, right? And so they are overspending. It is going to be a boon for the private prison industry, which is, like, I guess, one of the prime domestic industries now under the Trump administration. But it's not, it's not fiscally efficient, right? Like we're not doing, we're spending more than we had allocated to spend, and also just why are we doing this, right? Like some of these people, a lot of times this is used as an excuse for deportations, right? Which is like, well, the cost of the healthcare services for undocumented immigrants is just too high and we can't afford to pay it, so we got to send them back. But in a lot of these cases, these are people that are working in the country, that are paying taxes, that are not on the government roll, that actually we're making money from them because they're paying into Social Security but not taking it out because they're illegal. And so we're taking people that are contributing to society, and at some marginal number, like actually adding to the intake on the budget, and we're putting them in a prison where we have to monitor them 24/7, feed them, right? Like all the lawyers that you got to pay for to deal with all this, right? Like, it's crazy. It's insane. Like, what is the point of having an 18-year-old in prison? You're worried he's going to flee. You're trying to get him to flee back to Brazil.
It's insane. And the budget reconciliation bill has tens of billions, maybe even over $100 billion for DHS, basically for both prison capacity, basically, or detention capacity, as well as for some immigration judges, and so they can vote these things through faster. Maybe the immigration judges isn't a bad idea. That's something I think the Biden administration may propose. But again, some of that money could be used to beef up counterintelligence at the FBI, for example. But Kash Patel is busy firing, so far as I can tell, everyone at the FBI who knows anything about this. And
showing up to random immigration raids,
right?
Just like
and he's told them
he's
got these offices focusing more on immigration, not on counterterrorism. Those things could overlap at times, maybe as in Boulder. But again, in a normal administration, there are ways to reallocate resources, obviously, in light of changing conditions. I never know which cabinet member to get most outraged about. Hegseth had his moment in the sun, and that was pretty unbelievable and then the signal thing. Then Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I can't believe this guy is in charge of HHS. And then I think about Kristi Noem for 1 minute. And I think, well, she's the worst. She wins that competition. I don't know.
Rubio overseeing a international campaign of death, like taking away medicines from the world's poorest people.
Yeah.
Maybe. And while also jailing random students in this country because he doesn't like their opinion on the Gaza war. That's a pretty good nominee.
And Pam Bondi's got some really wonderful people there at Justice, doesn't he? That guy Ingrassia, is that his name? Who's some kind of...
Oh yeah, we're about to get to him.
Okay, so I mean, all right. Which is your choice? I'm sure you're good. You're a good judge of these kinds of things. Who's the actual most repulsive, and reprehensible cabinet secretary?
I keep changing. So this is a good question. Repulsive and reprehensible is different from worst. We did this game at the Chicago show, and for worst, I said Nutlick just because he's so bad as compared to what another Department of Commerce secretary would be. He's creating so much damage. But most reprehensible, I don't know how you can not pick Rubio. Maybe it's just because I expected more from him. But I mean, he has abandoned everything that he argued for in his 2016 campaign about his view of America's role in the world. And the result is tens of thousands of deaths. There's a Nick Kristof column this weekend about how Rubio accused him of lying about the deaths that are resulting from the cuts to USAID and PEPFAR. And Kristof's no, I'm not lying. Here's pictures of the people of the kids that are now dead because they weren't getting their medicine.
Just one foot on that quickly is interesting, and it ties into what we're talking about with healthcare. If they want to say America first, we can't be responsible for every kid in Africa who might have a disease, and so we're cutting back on all this humanitarian stuff. It's not something I like. It's not something I don't think the American people would support because I think we're wealthy enough to run a USAID program and PEPFAR, but it's not a intrinsically insane position. Obviously, you can't do everything, and there are other things we don't do abroad in terms of humanitarian. So, okay, we're going to cut back on this. We've overdone it. We're America first. That's sort of, and I'd say on healthcare too. We can't, it's just we can't have as big a Medicaid program as has grown up over the last decade or two. So we're going to cut back, and we're sorry. We're going to try to make sure that to limit the damage. But that's not what they say. They just lie. No one is being hurt by USAID cuts. No one is being hurt by Medicaid cuts. That's literally impossible. Yeah. I mean,
it's actually we're taking money away from these people that are scamming you, right? That's what they're saying.
Right.
We're saying
I mean, as I said, there's an honest conservative argument for doing less abroad and at home, for the government doing less. They're scared to make even that argument though, and so it's all you say it's either we're just stopping fraud and abuse. Or there is no effect. I mean, so what's his name? Vought, speaking of reprehensible characters, the OMB director goes on TV and just says there's no, what did he say? I think there's no one is losing coverage or no one is going to be hurt by these Medicaid cuts. It's literally impossible. The way they're saving money is by having some people not get coverage who are currently getting coverage.
I'm glad I got you riled up here before the end. I felt like we were a little sleepy at the start. All right, so before we get to, I want to get into the anti-Semitism stuff as the final topic, but just really quick, I just want to make sure you don't have any thoughts on the Glenn Greenwald sex tape or on former Washington Post reporter Taylor Lorenz quasi-endorsing 9/11. Those are two pretty...
I didn't even know about the second and the first. I'm kind of leaving. I'll leave to some of our colleagues here at the Bulwark,
Okay. All right. Don't leak people's sex tapes is my opinion.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Thing. That's fucking rude. And 9/11 was bad.
What is this? Taylor Lorenz thinks it was an inside.
Yeah, she's that social media reporter that's kind of crazy. That's still wearing an N95 mask everywhere, even outside in the park now in 2025. And she was the person that was covering the social media beat for the Washington Post and other places. And she's gone crazy and she did a post about how old people don't understand that young people have a different view on 9/11 and have come to understand that like the terrorists had some points. Anyway, I don't know. This is what's happening on TikTok right now, Bill.
We do have 9/11 truthers, if I can just point out, who have been at welcome at the White House, had dinner with Trump, probably in the administration, maybe not at the very top tier. I guess even Patel didn't quite go there, but certainly at the second and third tier, they've mingled with those people, right? So why are we surprised that that this is all now respectable?
We shouldn't be surprised. It's a great point. All right, let's end with some anti-Semitism talk. I've got kind of a rant about anti-Semitism and also kind of about how we've been covering some of this stuff, particularly related to the Nazi salutes. So before I get into my rant, do you have any additional thoughts from what you shared earlier about what we saw in Boulder yesterday?
Anti-Semitism is an awful thing, and it's just a terrible curse that for Jews, obviously, but really for all of us. But it should be combated. But no, I want to hear your rant.
Okay, here's my rant. You can react to it. So, there are very serious threats right now to anti-Semitism. That's very obvious to Jewish folks listening, and probably most folks listening. It is across the ideological spectrum. Right, you have a shirtless guy trying to globalize the Intifada in Boulder yesterday, lighting a Holocaust survivor on fire. That's very serious and horrible, and we should be dealing with it. As you mentioned earlier, this guy Paul Ingracia, he's a supporter of Holocaust denier Nick Fuentes and other right-wing anti-Semites. He was named to lead the Office of Special Counsel in the Trump administration. Jews are being harassed at synagogues. We've got a wide range of threats that have coming from folks. And so when I see that, we want to make sure that we are covering it and that folks are aware, and I think it's particularly true for young folks. Yeah, you look at polls of younger folks and what their views are of Israel, of anti-Semitism, of Jews broadly, is quite alarming. And so one thing I don't really love about people in our world is really the kind of comedic overemphasis on pointing and calling people Nazis in other contexts. And the thing I'm particularly thinking of right now is the Elon Musk and Bannon Nazi salute thing. I don't know if you saw this, but Cory Booker was over the weekend in California, and he did the same thing. It was he's putting his hand to his heart and then doing the hand, the wave. I would recommend the politicians not do that, the hand over the heart and the wave. But as a result, Elon is on Twitter this weekend, gleefully mocking all the people who called him a Nazi by comparing the video of him and Cory Booker. And I'm sorry to say that you hate to hand it to Elon or anything, but he has a fucking point. And on this podcast, I tried really hard not to do that. And I think that there are a lot of news people, just straight news people who covered that and tried to do it to inform people, and maybe did it in a way that didn't inform people that well. And there were a lot of resistance media people that were doing it in a way that they thought they were helping by being see, Elon's a Nazi, Elon's a Nazi. The thing is, these guys are doing actual terrible shit. There is SS style shit happening with ICE targeting not Jews, but targeting groups of people and sending them to foreign prisons. That's happening. That's a real thing that's happening. As we mentioned, the cutting of USAID, and Bill Gates' line about the richest man in the world being responsible for the deaths of the poorest people in the world. That's a thing to go after Elon on that is legitimate. The hiring this guy into the administration who seems to be a legit Nazi sympathizer, that is a thing to criticize these guys about. And so I think that when we do the silly stuff, it undermines all of that, right? And people who think they're being helpful are actually helping Elon now do propaganda and be see that you should just reject them anytime that they level this attack on us, because they would never make that attack on Cory Booker when he did the same hand motion that I did. And so that's it. Sometimes I get people who are who want me to do more of that kind of stuff. And I don't think that I think that it is actually does harm to the cause. And I think that it creates an unseriousness about the threat of anti-Semitism when it's really serious. And this is not an argument that we should not fight, and we should not try to fuck with these assholes when they're trying to fuck with other people. Like, I'm for all that, but like, I just think that we should be smart about it, and that we should give the fascists hell in a way that is helpful. And I just kind of ignored this when the Elon C. Kyle thing was happening. But in retrospect, I feel like I should give Sarah Longwell credit. In retrospect, I think it was Sarah that was like, I think that we should focus on other things. And I think that she was right about that. So anyway, that's my global
that's very
hot take on anti-Semitism.
That's interesting and I think correct, and a good reminder beyond anti-Semitism too. I mean, so just on Elon and the Nazi thing, I mean, he endorsed the AfD, the neo-Nazi party in Germany. That's when he was a senior White House official, and in fact, the Vice President Vance, did as well. And then Rubio had to, as your favorite cabinet member, had to chime in and follow along. That's serious. Like, the U.S. government is endorsing a party that Europe as a whole, not just Germany, and European conservatives as a whole have said repeatedly is beyond the pale, and has obvious Nazi and extremist elements deeply embedded in it. Maybe you could even say at the heart of it. So that's a real thing. And as you say, giving these people jobs in the Trump administration, that's a real thing. And the policies they're pursuing, God knows, in immigration and others, that's a real thing. And to be fair, you can say on the left, there are some real things that are that should be deplored, I believe, in terms of votes and policies they endorse and so forth. But yes, I think focusing on deeds and policies is better than focusing on the symbolic.
And just real shit.
Yeah.
Like, also make him defend that, just as a strategic matter. Like, make Elon defend the fact that, like, that this America First party doesn't care about what's happening around the world, except for, oh, wait, no, the only times we do care is when we're endorsing the neo-Nazi party in Germany and welcoming white Afrikaners to America. And besides that, we want to let everybody around the world die. Make them defend that. Like Elon was a sputtering mess trying to defend the Bill Gates attack on him in this interview he did. I think it was in Qatar that I was watching. Like, he was at some economic forum in the Middle East, and he's a sputtering mess trying to defend that. So, like, there's plenty of shit to attack them on, and so criticize. So do that, right? And then you don't have to get into this fucking situation where Cory Booker's in Sacramento doing a thing, and now, like, they feel like they have a get out of jail free card now. It's not smart, and it does, it gets. I see what gets the clicks. Like, it gets clicks. I see why people do it, but everybody should maybe be a little bit more wise. Do you have any wise final words for us, Bill?
No, the threat, just the obvious one. The threat is real, and it's fine to make fun of these guys to some degree. Obviously, it is
for sure.
It's more fine, even I would say, and this I think is where actually we're not doing enough. The liberals aren't doing enough in general. Pro-democracy forces to use politically the gaps and the possible rifts to open up cleavages among them. That's just as a political matter, a prudent thing, a sensible thing to do. Our colleague Joe Perdico had an interesting piece that Musk, who criticized the big beautiful bill in Congress, the reconciliation bill. Democrats haven't really used that much. Now, Democratic officials don't want to quote Musk, and I kind of agree with them that, as a source, because then it sort of legitimizes him. But third, this is why we have third-party groups, right, in existence, to sort of say, hey, to say to MAGA types, especially to Musk-friendly MAGA types, hey, your guy Musk doesn't like this bill either. So you can do a lot of accentuating the cleavages. But simply the mocking, it sort of reduces the seriousness of the situation, I think.
Yeah, or mock when it merits it, right? Like, rather than like mocking in a way that like lets that. Otherwise, you're just like a cog in this big fucking content game. Like, where you're doing one thing and your people are cheering, and then he's doing another thing calling your people stupid and his people are cheering. Like, nobody's fucking achieving anything about any of that. Anyway, the globalized intifada stuff is alarming. Yeah. It's concerning, and it's related but separate from this conversation about Elon, and so our thoughts got to the victims there, and just like the idea that one of the women that was targeted was a Holocaust survivor, just it darkens the heart. It's pretty sad. So anyway, that is that. We're here. We're going to keep giving fascists hell here. It's Bill Kristol. We'll see you back here next Monday. We got a good lineup this week, so stick around. We'll see you all then. Peace. Hey guys, it's Tim and Sarah. We're here with my frenemy, John Lovett from Love It or Leave It. June is Pride Month, and we're going to be live in D.C. on June 6th for World Pride for a very special live show fundraiser featuring the three of us, plus some gay special guests.
Crooked and the Bulwark will be donating the proceeds from this fundraiser to the Immigrant Defenders Law Center to support Andre Romero, the makeup artist who the Trump administration wrongly disappeared to El Salvador and who is currently being held in Sakat.
Go to crooked.com/events.
And we will see you all on June 6th.